In the vastness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists one universal truth that has puzzled alien minds for millennia: survival of the fittest. Every species claws their way to the top through violence, cunning, and the ruthless domination of lesser beings. But then humanity arrived, and they did something no other species in recorded galactic history had ever done. They befriended their food. What started as a routine first contact protocol between the Galactic Council and Earth quickly devolved into the most bewildering cultural exchange in cosmic history. While alien diplomats expected to meet apex predators who had conquered their world through superior firepower and tactical brilliance, they instead found creatures who had somehow convinced their planet's most dangerous animals to live in their homes, sleep in their beds, and protect their young. The question that now haunts every xenobiologist, military strategist, and philosopher across the galaxy is simple yet terrifying. If humans can turn wolves into loyal companions, tigers into house pets, and even venomous serpents into beloved family members, what could they possibly do to us? This is the story of how humanity's strangest trait became their greatest weapon, and how the simple act of petting an animal would forever change the balance of power in the universe. Ambassador Zexthal had witnessed first contact with 47 different species throughout his distinguished career with the Galactic Council, but never had he encountered anything quite like this. The massive Chronothan stood nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights of the diplomatic vessel as he reviewed the preliminary reports from Earth for the 100th time. His 4 compound eyes focused independently on different sections of the data, trying to make sense of the contradictions that seemed to define this peculiar species called humanity. According to the bioscans, humans were clearly apex predators. Their forward-facing eyes, omnivorous teeth, and bipedal stance all indicated a species that had fought its way to the top of their planet's food chain. Their technological advancement suggested intelligence and ruthlessness typical of dominant species. Yet the cultural analysis reports painted a picture so bizarre that Zexthal had initially assumed there had been some kind of translation error. The humans had apparently formed symbiotic relationships with hundreds of other species on their planet. Not parasitic relationships, not exploitation arrangements, but genuine partnerships where both species seemed to benefit. Even more confusing, many of these partnerships were with creatures that should theoretically be either prey or predator to humans. Dr. Viscera, the expedition's chief xenobiologist, floated beside him in her containment sphere filled with the methane-rich atmosphere her species required. The jellyfish-like aquarium's bioluminescent patches pulsed in patterns that indicated deep confusion. Ambassador, I've run the analysis 17 times. The data remains consistent, but inexplicable. These humans have somehow convinced carnivorous pack hunters to live in their homes and protect their offspring. The wolves, Zexthal rumbled, his voice creating harmonic frequencies that rattled the observation deck's viewports. Yes, I've read the reports, but surely there must be some form of neural conditioning involved. Chemical subjugation, perhaps. Before Viscera could respond, the communications officer, a 6-armed Zelthari named Piptik, began rapidly gesticulating in the universal sign for incoming transmission. Her chittering voice filled the bridge through the translation matrix. Incoming message from the human diplomatic vessel. They're requesting permission to bring representatives aboard for the formal first contact ceremony. Zexthal straightened to his full height. This was it. After months of careful preparation and analysis, they would finally meet these enigmatic humans face to face. The Galactic Council had established specific protocols for first contact with potentially dangerous species, and humans definitely fell into that category. Despite their apparently peaceful nature, any species that had achieved spaceflight was automatically classified as a potential threat. Grant them permission, he commanded, but maintain full defensive protocols and activate the containment fields in Diplomatic Bay 7. As the human shuttle approached their vessel, Zexthal couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this encounter. Usually, first contact with a new species involved careful posturing, displays of technological superiority, and subtle intimidation tactics designed to establish the Galactic Council's dominance. But the humans had approached them with what their analysis computers could only classify as enthusiastic friendliness. The shuttle docked with a gentle precision that spoke of advanced piloting skills, yet the communications that had preceded it were filled with expressions of gratitude and excitement that seemed almost childlike in their sincerity. Zexthal made his way to the diplomatic bay, accompanied by his full cultural analysis team and a discreet security detail. The bay doors cycled open with a soft hiss, and Zexthal got his first direct visual contact with humanity. The creature that stepped through the airlock was smaller than he had expected, standing barely 2 meters tall. Its pale skin was covered in some form of decorative fabric, and the hair on its head had been artificially styled. But what struck Zexthal immediately were its eyes. Unlike the cold, calculating gaze he was accustomed to from other apex predators, the human's eyes seemed to radiate warmth and genuine curiosity. "Greetings," the human said, its voice transmitted through a universal translator. "I am Dr. Sarah Chun, representing the United Earth Government's Department of Interstellar Relations. On behalf of all humanity, I want to express our profound honor at this historic meeting." The formal greeting was appropriate, but there was something about the human's demeanor that puzzled Zexthal. Where other species typically displayed either submissive caution or aggressive confidence during first contact, this human seemed genuinely delighted to be there. "I am Ambassador Zexthal of the Chronothan Empire, speaking for the Galactic Council," he replied, his deep voice carefully modulated to convey authority without threat. "We welcome Earth to the galactic community, pending the completion of our cultural compatibility assessment." Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. "Of course, we've prepared extensive documentation about human culture, history, and biology. We're also eager to learn about your civilizations. But first," she paused and glanced toward the shuttle. "I hope you don't mind, but we brought a small demonstration that we thought might help illustrate one of humanity's unique characteristics." Before Zexthal could respond, another figure emerged from the shuttle. This human was larger and wore what appeared to be some form of protective gear. In his arms, he carried a creature that made every alien in the diplomatic bay freeze in terror. It was clearly a predator. Its muscular body, sharp teeth, and alert posture screamed danger to every evolutionary instinct possessed by the assembled aliens. The creature's head swiveled as it surveyed the room, its dark eyes focusing on each alien in turn with what could only be described as predatory assessment. Dr. Viscera's bioluminescent patches flashed bright red in alarm. "Weapon," she pulsed. "The humans have brought a biological weapon." The security detail immediately raised their energy weapons, but Dr. Chin held up her hands in a peaceful gesture. "Please, don't be alarmed. This is Max, my companion. He's what we call a dog. Well, technically he's a German Shepherd, which is a specific breed of domesticated wolf." The word from the translator made no sense to Zexthal. Domesticated wolf? How could such a thing exist? Wolves were apex predators on most worlds that had them. The concept of domestication implied willing cooperation, which was biologically impossible for competing apex species. "I don't understand," Zexthal said slowly. "You speak of this creature as if it chooses to cooperate with you. Surely you mean that you have enslaved it through some form of neural conditioning." Dr. Chin's expression shifted to one of confusion, then something that looked almost like sadness. "Enslaved? No, nothing like that. Max is my partner, my friend. We chose each other." She reached down and gently stroked the creature's head. Impossibly, the fearsome predator's eyes closed, and it leaned into her touch, making a sound that the translator rendered as contentment. The entire diplomatic bay fell silent. Zexthal's 4 eyes focused on the scene before him, trying to process what he was witnessing. The human was touching the predator with no protective gear, no restraints, no visible means of control. And the predator was not only tolerating this contact, but actually seemed to enjoy it. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Viscera. "Apex predators do not form cooperative bonds with other apex predators. It violates every principle of evolutionary biology." Dr. Chen looked up from petting her companion. "Max isn't just cooperative. He's protective. If anyone threatened me, he would defend me with his life. And I would do the same for him. That's what partnership means." To demonstrate her point, Dr. Chen sat down on the floor of the diplomatic bay, bringing herself to the creature's level. The dog immediately moved closer, resting its massive head on her lap while maintaining its alert watch over the room. The human continued stroking its fur, speaking to it in soft tones that seemed to relax the animal even further. "We call this petting," Dr. Chen explained. "It's a form of physical affection that strengthens our bond. Max enjoys it because it releases chemicals in his brain that make him feel good. And I enjoy it because it does the same for me. It's a mutually beneficial behavior that reinforces our partnership." Zexthal found himself leaning forward despite every instinct telling him to maintain distance from the predator. "You mean to tell me that this creature genuinely chooses to cooperate with you? That there is no coercion involved?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Dr. Chen replied. "Humans have formed partnerships like this with hundreds of different species. Dogs are probably our closest companions, but we also work with horses, cats, birds, even some reptiles and marine animals. In many cases, these animals live better lives with us than they would in the wild." The human reached into a pouch attached to her clothing and produced a small object which she offered to the dog. The creature accepted it gently, without aggression, and began chewing contentedly. "That's a treat," Dr. Chen explained. "A small food reward that I give Max when he's been particularly good. It's another way we strengthen our bond." Dr. Viscera's patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating profound confusion. "But what do you receive in return? What does the creature provide that justifies the resources you expend on it?" Dr. Chen's face lit up with what the translator could only render as joy. "Companionship, loyalty, unconditional love. Max makes my life better just by being in it. He alerts me to dangers I might miss, provides emotional support when I'm stressed, and gives me a sense of purpose in caring for him. But more than that, he's my friend. The relationship isn't transactional. We care about each other." As if understanding the conversation, the dog lifted its head and looked directly at Dr. Chen. Its tail began moving in what was clearly a gesture of happiness, and it made a soft sound that seemed to be some form of communication. Dr. Chen smiled and responded to the creature as if it had spoken actual words. "I know, boy. These are new friends. They're trying to understand how we work together." The simplicity of the exchange was more unsettling to Zexthal than any display of military might could have been. Here was a human communicating with another species at a level that suggested genuine understanding and emotional connection. The implications were staggering. Throughout galactic history, species relationships have been defined by clear hierarchies. The strong dominated the weak. Resources were acquired through conquest or trade, and emotional attachments were viewed as exploitable weaknesses. Yet here was a species that had apparently built their entire civilization on the concept of mutual cooperation with other life forms. Captain Torvak, the expedition's military advisor, stepped forward. The reptilian sauroid scales had shifted to the modeled pattern that indicated extreme caution. "Dr. Chun, your species' ability to form these partnerships is fascinating. But surely you must understand how this appears to us. If humans can convince predators to serve them willingly, what assurance do we have that you won't attempt to use these same techniques on us?" The question hung in the air like a charged particle field. Dr. Chen's expression grew serious as she considered her response. "I understand your concern, Captain, but there's something important you need to understand about how these partnerships work. They're based on mutual respect and genuine care. You can't force someone to love you. You can't trick them into forming a real bond. It has to be freely given on both sides. She gestured to Max, who was now lying on his side, completely relaxed despite being surrounded by alien creatures that his instincts should have classified as threats. Max trusts me because I've earned that trust through consistent care and kindness. I've never hurt him, never betrayed him, never put my needs before his well-being when it mattered. That's why he's comfortable here, in what should be a terrifying situation for him. Zexthal found himself studying the relationship between human and dog with new eyes. The creature's body language spoke of complete trust and contentment. There was no fear in its posture, no tension that might indicate suppressed aggression or hidden coercion. It was simply a being at peace in the presence of its chosen companion. But how did this begin? Zexthal asked. How did your species first discover this ability to form such partnerships? Dr. Chen's eyes grew distant as she considered the question. Archaeological evidence suggests it began with wolves. Actually, thousands of years ago, some wolves began following human hunting parties, feeding on the remains of our kills. Over time, the wolves that were less aggressive and more tolerant of humans had better access to food. Meanwhile, humans began to notice that the wolves could warn them of approaching dangers and help them track prey. She scratched behind Max's ears, eliciting another sound of contentment. It was a gradual process that took thousands of years. Each generation of wolves became slightly more comfortable with humans, and each generation of humans became better at understanding and communicating with wolves. Eventually, we weren't just tolerating each other. We were actively working together. But the evolutionary pressure, Dr. Bisara interjecta. How did your species overcome the natural competition for resources? We realized that cooperation could produce more resources than competition, Dr. Chen explained. A human with a wolf companion could hunt more successfully than either could alone. The partnership made both species stronger. As the conversation continued, more humans emerged from the shuttle. Each carried or was accompanied by a different creature. Zexthal watched in amazement as he was introduced to a small feline that the humans called a cat, a large equine called a horse, and even a colorful bird that could apparently mimic human speech. But what truly shocked him was watching the humans interact with these creatures. There was no dominance display, no assertion of authority. Instead, there was what could only be described as affection. The humans touched their companions gently, spoke to them in soft tones, and seemed genuinely concerned for their comfort and happiness. The bird, which Dr. Chen introduced as a parrot named Rainbow, actually participated in the conversation. It asked questions in what appeared to be genuine curiosity about the alien visitors, and responded to their answers with commentary that suggested actual understanding rather than mere mimicry. Pretty crystal person, Rainbow squawked at Zexthal. Very big, very shiny. Rainbow likes crystal person. The directness and apparent sincerity of the statement caught Zexthal completely off guard. He found himself responding as he would to any intelligent being. Thank you, Rainbow. You are quite colorful yourself. The parrot preened at the compliment, then turned to its human companion. Sarah, crystal person is nice. Can Rainbow sit on crystal person? Dr. Chun looked questioningly at Zexthal. Would you mind? She's very gentle, and she's clearly interested in you. It will be quite an honor. Rainbow doesn't like everyone she meets. Against every protocol he had ever learned, Zexthal found himself extending one of his lower arms. The colorful bird hopped from Dr. Chen's shoulder to his crystalline appendage, her small talons gripping carefully to avoid scratching his surface. Very strong crystal person, Rainbow announced. Good perch. Rainbow approves. The moment was surreal. Here he was, a representative of one of the galaxy's most powerful military civilizations, being evaluated and apparently approved by a small Earth creature. And somehow, the approval mattered to him. As the diplomatic meeting progressed, Zexthal found his understanding of humanity shifting in ways he hadn't expected. These weren't conquering predators who had dominated their world through superior firepower. They were collaborators who had built their entire civilization on the foundation of interspecies partnerships. When Dr. Chun began describing human cities, Zexthal learned that they shared their urban environments with millions of other species. Parts were designed to provide habitat for local wildlife. Buildings incorporated nesting sites for birds. Even their transportation systems were planned around wildlife migration patterns. You mean to tell me, Captain Torvak said slowly, that when humans design their cities, they consider the needs of other species? Of course, Dr. Chun replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. We share the planet with them. Why wouldn't we consider their needs? The concept was revolutionary. Every other spacefaring species had achieved dominance by eliminating or subjugating competing life forms on their homeworld. The idea of deliberately sharing resources and habitat with other species was not just unusual, it was unprecedented. As the formal presentations concluded and the diplomatic teams prepared to adjourn for individual consultations, Zexthal found himself watching Dr. Chin pack up her materials while Max lay contentedly at her feet. Rainbow had fallen asleep on his arm, her colorful feathers ruffling gently with each breath. Dr. Chun, he said quietly, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, she replied, looking up from her work. This bond you share with your companions, is it representative of how humans form all relationships? Dr. Chun considered the question carefully. In many ways, yes. Obviously, human relationships with other humans are more complex because we can communicate more directly. But the basic principles are the same. We value cooperation over domination. We believe that life is better when we work together rather than against each other. She gestured toward the assembled aliens. That's why we're so excited about joining the galactic community. We see this as an opportunity to form new partnerships, to learn from each other, and to build something greater than any of US could achieve alone. As Dr. Chun gathered her companions and prepared to return to the shuttle, Zexthal realized that this first contact was unlike any he had ever experienced. Usually, such meetings ended with careful negotiations about trade agreements, defense treaties, and territorial boundaries. But the humans seemed more interested in friendship than commerce, more focused on cooperation than conquest. Rainbow stirred on his arm and looked up at him with bright, intelligent eyes. Crystal Person is good friend, she said softly. Rainbow will remember Crystal Person. Will Crystal Person remember Rainbow? The simple question struck Zexthal with unexpected force. In all his years of diplomatic service, no being had ever asked him such a thing. Treaties were remembered, trade agreements were honored, but personal connections were considered irrelevant to interstellar relations. Yes, he heard himself saying, I will remember Rainbow. As the human delegation departed, Zexthal stood at the observation viewport, watching their shuttle disappear into the star field. The diplomatic bay felt strangely empty without them, and he realized that something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of what it meant to be a sentient species. Dr. Viscera floated beside him, her patterns shifting through confused purples and thoughtful blues. Ambassador, how do we classify this? Their military capabilities are impressive, their technology is advanced, but their entire social structure is based on principles we don't even have words for. Zexthal continued staring out into space, one hand unconsciously stroking the spot where Rainbow had perched. I don't know, he admitted, but I think we're going to have to create new categories. As reports of the first contact began flowing back to the Galactic Council, one thing became clear. Humanity would not fit neatly into any existing framework for understanding spacefaring civilizations. There was something entirely new, something that challenged every assumption about how apex predators were supposed to behave. And deep in the halls of power across the galaxy, military strategists and political leaders were beginning to ask a very uncomfortable question. If humans could turn wolves into loyal companions, what might they be able to do with other intelligent species? 3 weeks after the initial first contact, the Galactic Council's most advanced research facility buzzed with unprecedented activity. The Nexus Station, a massive structure orbiting the neutron star Kepler 442, housed the galaxy's finest xenobiologists, psychologists, and behavioral scientists. Never before had a single species generated such intense scientific interest. Dr. Keth Mori, the facility's chief researcher, was a being who had dedicated her life to understanding the behavioral patterns of intelligent species. Her people, the Zilithians, possessed a unique neural structure that allowed them to process multiple streams of consciousness simultaneously, making them ideal for complex analytical work. Currently, all 7 of her consciousness threads were focused on the mountain of data that had arrived from the human homeworld. The behavioral patterns are consistent across all human populations, she announced to the assembled research team. Her voice carried the harmonic undertones typical of her species, creating complex musical phrases that the universal translator rendered into standard galactic. From the Arctic regions to the tropical zones, from their most advanced cities to their most primitive settlements, humans consistently form these cooperative bonds with other species. The holographic display in the center of the laboratory showed a 3-dimensional map of Earth, dotted with millions of data points representing documented cases of human-animal partnerships. The sheer scale was overwhelming. Dr. Nixura, a void-born researcher whose species had evolved in the cold depths of space, gestured toward the display with one of her many articulated limbs. The energy expenditure alone should make this behavior evolutionarily disadvantageous. Humans allocate significant resources to caring for creatures that provide no apparent survival benefit. That's just it, Dr. Keth Mori replied, manipulating the display to show detailed case studies. Our analysis suggests that these partnerships do provide survival benefits, but not in ways we've previously documented. Look at this data from their medical studies. The hologram shifted to show complex biological data streams. Humans who maintain these animal partnerships show measurably better physical and psychological health indicators. Lower stress hormones, improved immune function, increased longevity, and enhanced emotional stability. Dr. Vostek, a mantis-like arthropod whose species was known for their logical approach to problem-solving, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. But correlation does not establish causation. Perhaps healthier humans are simply more capable of maintaining these partnerships. Before Dr. Keth Mori could respond, the laboratory's communication system chimed with an incoming priority transmission. The image of Ambassador Zexthal materialized in the center of the room, his crystalline features reflecting the station's artificial lighting. Research team, I have news that will impact your current study. The human delegation has requested permission to visit Nexus Station. They wish to demonstrate their partnership abilities under controlled laboratory conditions. Dr. Keth Mori's 7 consciousness streams immediately began processing the implications. Ambassador, we would welcome such a demonstration. However, I must warn you that our facility protocols require the isolation of potentially dangerous specimens. If they bring more of these predatory creatures. I understand your concerns, Zexthal interrupted. But I believe you misunderstand the nature of what we're dealing with. These humans aren't controlling dangerous animals. They're genuinely partnered with them. I've seen it firsthand. 3 days later, the human research vessel approaching Nexus Station created quite a stir among the scientific community. Unlike most diplomatic ships, which were sleek and intimidating, the human vessel appeared to be designed for comfort and habitability. Large transparent sections allowed observers to see gardens and recreational areas inside the ship, a design philosophy that prioritized quality of life over military efficiency. Dr. Chun was once again leading the human delegation, but this time she was accompanied by a much larger team of scientists and an impressive variety of animal companions. As the humans made their way through the station's docking facilities, the alien researchers got their first close look at the diversity of creatures that had somehow formed partnerships with humanity. There were the dogs, of course, ranging from massive specimens that rivaled small vehicles in size to tiny creatures that could fit in the palm of a human hand. But There were also cats of various sizes and colors, horses that moved with obvious intelligence and purpose, birds that conversed with their human partners in complex exchanges, and even more exotic creatures that the database had no classifications for. Dr. Kethmori watched the procession through the station's security monitors, all 7 of her consciousness streams working to catalog and analyze what she was seeing. Fascinating. Look at the behavioral synchronization between species. They're moving as coordinated groups rather than collections of individuals. What struck her most was the absence of any visible control mechanisms. No restraints, no choque devices, no química suppressantes. The animals moved freely among the humans, yet they stayed close to their apparent partners without any external compulsion. In Laboratory Complex 7, the largest research space on the station, Dr. Chun began setting up what she called demonstration stations. Each station would showcase a different type of human-animal partnership, allowing the alien scientists to observe and record the interactions under controlled conditions. Before we begin, Dr. Chin announced to the assembled researchers, "I want to address what I suspect is your primary concern. You're wondering if these partnerships could be used to manipulate or control other intelligent species. The short answer is no, and I'm going to show you why." She gestured to her companion Max, who was investigating the laboratory's unfamiliar sense with obvious curiosity. The key to understanding our partnerships is recognizing that they're based on genuine emotional connections. You can't fake the neurochemical responses that create these bonds. Dr. Kethmori leaned forward, her multiple consciousness streams focusing intently. "Explain the neurochemical process. How do these emotional connections form?" Dr. Chen smiled and pulled out a handheld device that projected holographic brain scans. When humans interact with their animal partners through physical contact, both species release oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins. These are the same chemicals involved in bonding between human parents and children. The brain scans showed real-time neurochemical activity as Dr. Chun petted Max. Both human and dog brains lit up with activity in regions associated with pleasure, trust, and emotional attachment. But here's the crucial part, Dr. Chin continued. These responses can't be artificially induced for long-term bonding. The brain adapts to artificial stimulation and stops responding. Genuine partnerships require consistent, authentic interaction over extended periods. Dr. Nixera's energy patterns shifted to indicate intense curiosity. "You mentioned that this process is similar to parental bonding. Are you suggesting that humans view these creatures as offspring?" "In some ways, yes," Dr. Chin replied. "But it's more complex than that. Different partnerships have different dynamics. Some are like parent-child relationships, some are more like sibling bonds, and some are partnerships between equals." To demonstrate this point, she called over Dr. Marcus Webb, a tall human who was accompanied by a magnificent horse. The creature stood nearly 2 meters tall at its shoulders, its muscles clearly visible beneath its glossy coat. "This is Thunder," Dr. Marcus said, resting his hand on the horse's neck. "Our partnership is based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Thunder is incredibly intelligent and makes his own decisions about whether to cooperate with me." To prove his point, Dr. Marcus stepped away from the horse and gestured toward a series of obstacles that had been set up in the laboratory. Without any visible commands or signals, Thunder began navigating the course, jumping over barriers and weaving between markers with perfect precision. "Thunder is choosing to perform these actions, Dr. Marcus explained. "If he decided he didn't want to participate, there would be nothing I could do to force him. A horse this size could easily injure or kill a human if it chose to do so." The alien scientists watched in amazement as the massive creature completed the course and then returned to Dr. Marcus, gently nuzzling his shoulder in what was clearly an affectionate gesture. Dr. Vostek's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "This violates everything we understand about dominant-subordinate relationships. The creature clearly has the physical power to dominate the human, yet it chooses to cooperate." "Why?" Dr. Marcus smiled and produced something from his pocket. Because our relationship benefits both of us. Thunder enjoys the mental stimulation of learning new skills, and he knows that working with me means he'll be well-fed, comfortable, and safe. But more than that, we genuinely enjoy each other's company. He offered the treat to Thunder, who accepted it delicately despite having teeth large enough to sever a human hand. The gentleness of the interaction was perhaps more unsettling to the alien observers than any display of force would have been. At another station, Dr. Sarah Kim was demonstrating the partnership between humans and felines. Unlike the obvious cooperation of dogs and horses, cats seem to represent a more complex relationship dynamic. Cats are independent partners, Dr. Kim explained, as a sleek black cat named Shadow weaved between her legs. They choose when and how to interact with us. This relationship is based more on mutual respect than on hierarchy. Shadow suddenly froze, his attention focusing on Dr. Nixera. The cat approached the void-born researcher cautiously, studying her unique physiology with obvious curiosity. After a moment of assessment, Shadow sat down just outside her personal space and began making a rhythmic rumbling sound. He's purring, Dr. Kim explained. It's a sign of contentment and friendship. Shadow is telling Dr. Nixera that he finds her interesting and non-threatening. Dr. Nixera's energy patterns shifted to what could only be described as wonder. The creature is attempting to communicate with me, but we have no shared evolutionary history. How could it assess my intentions? Cats are excellent at reading body language and energy, Dr. Kim replied. They've evolved alongside humans for thousands of years, learning to interpret our emotional states. But they've also maintained their ability to assess other species. Shadow can sense that you're curious rather than aggressive. As if to prove the point, Shadow stood and moved closer to Dr. Nixera, carefully extending his head toward one of her lower appendages. The gesture was clearly an invitation for physical contact. Dr. Nixera hesitated, her energy patterns flickering with uncertainty. Is it safe? Will the creature become aggressive if I touch it incorrectly? Dr. Kim shook her head. Shadow wouldn't approach you if he didn't want contact. And cats are very good at communicating their boundaries. If he becomes uncomfortable, he'll simply move away. Cautiously, Dr. Nixera extended one of her articulated limbs and gently touched Shadow's head. The cat immediately increased the volume of his purring and leaned into the contact. Within moments, the alien researcher was experiencing something unprecedented in her species' history, voluntary physical affection from another life form. The vibrations, Dr. Nixera said softly, they're pleasant. I can feel them resonating through my exoskeleton. Doktor, himsimidet. Purring has been shown to have therapeutic effects. The frequency can help with healing and stress reduction. Shadow is actually providing you with a form of medical treatment. But the most remarkable demonstration was yet to come. Dr. Jennifer Santos approached the center of the laboratory accompanied by a creature that made every alien researcher take an involuntary step backward. It was clearly a predator, larger and more powerfully built than even the dogs. Its spotted coat rippled over muscles that spoke of incredible strength and speed. Its eyes held an intelligence that was both beautiful and terrifying. This is Aurora, Dr. Santos announced calmly. She's a jaguar, one of Earth's apex predators. In the wild, jaguars are solitary hunters capable of taking down prey many times their size. Dr. Kethmori's consciousness streams began firing alarm patterns. Dr. Santos, surely this creature requires specialized restraints? The risk to station personnel. Aurora has never been restrained in her life, Dr. Santos replied. She's here because she chooses to be. Our partnership began when she was injured, and I provided medical care. When she recovered, she chose to stay with me rather than return to the wild. To demonstrate the trust between them, Dr. Santos laid down on the laboratory floor. Aurora immediately moved to lie beside her, resting her massive head on the human stomach. The sight of an apex predator in such a vulnerable position with another apex predator was so alien to the observers that several of them began questioning their own sensory inputs. How is this possible? Dr. Vostek managed to ask. Every evolutionary model predicts that competing apex predators should either fight or avoid each other. Dr. Santos gently stroked Aurora's fur, and the massive cat began producing a rumbling sound even deeper than the domestic cat's purr. Because we're not competing, we're cooperating. Aurora and I work together. She helps me with wildlife research, tracking other animals that would be impossible for me to find alone. In return, I provide her with consistent food, medical care, and companionship. Dr. Keth Mori's analytical processes were working at maximum capacity, try to reconcile what she was witnessing with everything she understood about interspecies relationships. But the trust required for such proximity. How do you know the creature won't revert to predatory behavior? The same way you know your colleagues won't attack you, Dr. Santos replied. Through time, experience, and genuine understanding of each other's nature. Aurora knows I'm not a threat to her, and I know she's not a threat to me. We've spent years building this relationship. As if responding to the conversation, Aurora opened her golden eyes and looked directly at Dr. Keth Mori. The predator's gaze was calm and curious, showing no signs of aggression or fear. After a moment, Aurora made a soft, chuffing sound that Dr. Santos translated as a greeting. She's saying hello, Dr. Santos explained. Aurora is actually quite social, despite her species' reputation for solitude. She enjoys meeting new beings, as long as they're not threatening. The implications of what they were witnessing began to sink in among the research team. Here was conclusive proof that humans possessed an ability that was unique in the known galaxy. They could form genuine emotional bonds with species that should theoretically be either prey or competitors. Dr. Chun rejoined the group as the individual demonstrations concluded. What you've seen today represents thousands of years of coevolution between humans and other Earth species. But here's what I think will really interest you. These partnerships have made both species better than they would have been alone. She activated a holographic display showing comparative data. Dogs partnered with humans live longer, healthier lives than their wild cousins. They've developed enhanced problem-solving abilities and emotional intelligence. Horses working with humans have access to veterinary care that extends their lifespans and improves their quality of life. Even predators like Aurora benefit from guaranteed food sources and protection from environmental hazards. And humans? Dr. Keth Mori asked. Humans with animal partners show improved physical health, better emotional stability, and enhanced cognitive function, Dr. Chen replied. We've literally evolved together to become more than the sum of our parts. Dr. Nixera, who was still gently petting Shadow, spoke up. But could this ability be applied to relationships between different intelligent species? Could humans form similar bonds with us? The question hung in the air like a charged particle. It was the question that every political and military leader in the galaxy would eventually ask, the question that would determine humanity's place in the galactic community. Dr. Chun considered her response carefully. I believe the potential exists, but it would require something that has never happened before in galactic history: mutual trust and genuine respect between species. The bonds you've seen today took thousands of years to develop. They can't be rushed or forced. She looked around the laboratory at the assembled researchers. But if different species were willing to approach each other with openness and patience, if they could move beyond seeing each other as potential threats or resources to exploit, then, yes, I believe meaningful partnerships could develop. Dr. Shadow had fallen asleep in DR. Nixera's embrace, his purrs creating a gentle vibration that seemed to calm the void-born researcher. Aurora was still lying peacefully beside Dr. Santos, occasionally opening one eye to survey the room before returning to her rest. Thunder had moved to Dr. Marcus's side and was gently nuzzling the human's shoulder while investigating the alien researchers with obvious curiosity. The scene was unprecedented in galactic history. Multiple apex predators from different worlds, existing peacefully in the same space, united by their bonds with humanity. It was a vision of cooperation that challenged every assumption about how the universe was supposed to work. As the research session concluded and the human delegation prepared to return to their vessel, Dr. Kethmori found herself experiencing something her species had no name for. It was a sense of loss at the departure of beings she had barely met, combined with an eagerness to see them again. "Dr. Chun," she called out as the humans gathered their companions. "Would it be possible for us to continue these observations? Perhaps arrange for longer-term studies?" Dr. Chun smiled. "I was hoping you would ask. We'd be delighted to work with your researchers. In fact, we've been wondering if any of you might be interested in experiencing these partnerships firsthand." The suggestion sent ripples of excitement and terror through the assembled scientists. The idea of forming personal bonds with alien beings was so far outside their experience that most couldn't even conceptualize what it might involve. But as they watched the humans leave, many found themselves wondering what it might be like to be trusted so completely by another being, to have a companion who would stand by them through any danger, to experience the kind of loyalty and affection they had witnessed. Deep in the research facility's quantum communication arrays, reports began flowing to every corner of the galaxy. The initial assessments were complete, and the conclusions were undeniable. Humanity possessed an ability that was not just unique, but potentially revolutionary. The question was no longer whether humans could form partnerships with other species. The question was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready for what that might mean. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had witnessed many momentous debates throughout its 1,000-year history, but never one quite like this. Representatives from over 200 civilizations filled the massive amphitheater, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, harmonics, electromagnetic pulses, and chemical signatures of the Universal Translation System worked overtime to convert into coherent dialogue. At the center of the circular chamber, a holographic display showed the accumulated data from 6 months of intensive study on human partnership abilities. The numbers were staggering, the implications profound, and the potential consequences terrifying to many of the assembled delegates. Supreme Chancellor Vexthera, a being whose species had evolved from ancient tree-like organisms, raised her massive branch arms to call for order. Her voice resonated through specialized acoustic amplifiers that could reproduce the harmonic frequencies necessary for interspecies communication. Honored delegates, we gather today to address the most significant discovery in galactic history: the existence of a species capable of forming genuine emotional partnerships with other life forms. The question before us is simple in scope, but complex in implication. What do we do about humanity? Fleet Admiral Korgesh, representing the militaristic hegemony of worlds, was the first to speak. His insectoid form clicked and chittered as he gestured toward the data display. The threat assessment is clear. If humans can convince apex predators to serve them willingly, they could potentially destabilize every established power structure in the galaxy. Their abilities represent a form of biological warfare that our defense systems cannot counter. Murmurs of agreement rippled through several military blocs. The concept of voluntary cooperation was so foreign to many species that they could only interpret it as a sophisticated form of mind control. Dr. Velthera, representing the scientific consortium, projected her disagreement through the bioluminescent patches covering her aquatic form. "Admiral, you fundamentally misunderstand the nature of what we're observing. Human partnership abilities cannot be weaponized because they require genuine emotional investment and extended time periods to develop. You cannot force someone to love you. Propaganda and psychological manipulation have been effective tools of conquest throughout galactic history," Admiral Korgesh countered. "What evidence do we have that human partnerships are anything more than sophisticated behavioral conditioning?" Before Dr. Velthera could respond, a new voice entered the debate. Ambassador Zexthal had requested special permission to address the assembly, and his massive crystalline form now stood at the center of the chamber. Honored delegates, I have spent more time in direct contact with humans than any other being in this assembly. I have observed their partnerships firsthand, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that what we are witnessing is not manipulation or control. It is something our languages barely have words for: genuine mutual affection between different species. The chamber fell silent. Zexthal was known throughout the galaxy as a pragmatic and analytical diplomat, not given to emotional statements or philosophical speculation. 6 months ago, he continued, a small earth bird named Rainbow perched on my arm and asked if I would remember her. That simple question changed my entire understanding of what it means to be a sentient being. The bird showed no fear, no calculation, no hidden agenda. She simply wanted to connect with another conscious entity. He activated a personal recording device, projecting the moment from the first contact meeting. The assembled delegates watched in fascination as the colorful Earth creature interacted with Zexthal, showing obvious pleasure in making a new acquaintance. This is not strategic thinking, Zexthal explained. This is not manipulation. This is an alien intelligence choosing to trust me and finding joy in that choice. And in that moment, I understood why humans have been so successful in their world. They don't dominate other species. They invite them to become partners. Counselor Thexnera, representing the Philosophical Union, projected thoughtful patterns through her energy-based form. Ambassador Zexthal raises a profound point. Perhaps our focus on the potential threats has blinded us to the potential opportunities. What if humanity's approach could actually improve galactic civilization? This suggestion caused an immediate uproar among the more traditional delegates. The idea that established civilizations might need improvement was heretical to species that had built their identities around concepts of superiority and dominance. Trade coordinator Plim Bork, whose species had achieved spaceflight through ruthless capitalism, waved his multiple appendages dismissively. Philosophical speculation aside, let's discuss practical realities. Human economic models are completely irrational. They allocate vast resources to caring for creatures that provide no measurable economic benefit. Their cities are designed around the needs of non-productive species. Their entire civilization operates on principles that would bankrupt any rational economy. And yet, interjected Commerce Representative Dismaya, Human Worlds report the highest quality of life indices we've ever recorded. Their crime rates are negligible, their psychological health metrics are off the charts, and their innovation rates exceed anything we've seen in documented galactic history. Perhaps there's something to be said for irrational resource allocation. The debate was interrupted by an emergency communication from the monitoring station observing Earth. The image of Dr. Kethmori appeared in the center of the assembly, her 7 consciousness streams clearly agitated. Honor Council, I'm transmitting real-time data from an event currently unfolding on the human homeworld. You need to see this. The holographic display shifted to show a scene from one of Earth's major cities. A massive structure was burning, sending pillars of smoke into the atmosphere. Emergency response teams were working frantically to evacuate the area, but the scale of the disaster seemed overwhelming. This is a children's hospital, Dr. Kethmori explained. The building's emergency systems failed during what humans call a wildfire. There are over 200 young humans trapped inside, and conventional rescue methods are proving insufficient. The assembled delegates watched in horror as the situation unfolded. Fires of this magnitude were beyond the capabilities of most species' emergency response capabilities. The logical response would be to evacuate who they could and accept the losses of those too deeply trapped. But what happened next defied all logical expectation. From multiple directions, creatures began converging on the burning building. Not human emergency responders, but animals. Dogs of various sizes burst through the smoke, somehow navigating the burning corridors to locate trapped children. Horses arrived carrying supply packs, and additional rescue equipment. Even more remarkably, birds began acting as scouts, flying through the smoke to identify safe evacuation routes. "This is impossible," Admiral Korgesh muttered. "Animals should flee from fire, not run toward it." Dr. Kethmori's voice carried a note of awe. "That's exactly what we thought. But watch what happens." The display zoomed in on specific rescue operations. A massive dog was gently carrying a small human child in its mouth, moving with obvious care to avoid injuring the fragile being. A horse was allowing injured children to climb onto its back, then carefully navigating burning debris to reach safety. Most remarkably, a large cat was leading a group of children through smoke-filled corridors, somehow knowing exactly which routes were safe. "The animals are making conscious decisions to risk their lives for humans," Dr. Kethmori explained. "They're not following commands or acting on trained responses. They're choosing to help because they understand that their human partners need them." The implications of what they were witnessing hit the assembly like a shockwave. This wasn't just partnership or cooperation. This was self-sacrifice, the willingness of one species to risk death to protect another. But the most extraordinary moment was yet to come. A group of children was trapped on an upper floor with no apparent escape route. The smoke was too thick for human responders to navigate, and the structure was becoming increasingly unstable. Then, a new figure appeared at the edge of the screen. It was Aurora, the jaguar they had observed during the research demonstration. The massive predator moved through the burning building with fluid grace, her superior senses allowing her to navigate where humans could not. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as Aurora reached the trapped children. Rather than showing fear at the sight of an apex predator, the children immediately moved toward her. They seemed to understand instinctively that she was there to help them. One by one, Aurora guided the children to safety, using her knowledge of the building's layout and her ability to sense structural weaknesses to find routes that human rescuers had missed. When one child became too overcome by smoke to walk, Aurora gently lifted the small human in her powerful jaws and carried them to safety. "This defies every known principle of evolutionary biology," Dr. Velthera observed, her bioluminescent patterns shifting through rapid cycles of amazement and confusion. "A predator species voluntarily entering a life-threatening situation to protect the offspring of another species. There's no precedent for this behavior anywhere in the galactic database." As the rescue operation concluded, the final statistics were sobering. Over 200 children had been successfully evacuated from the burning hospital, 0 fatalities, and more than half of the rescues had been performed by non-human partners working alongside human emergency responders. The holographic display shifted to show the aftermath. Human rescue workers were tending to their animal partners with the same care they showed their own injured colleagues. Medical teams were providing treatment to dogs with smoke inhalation, horses with burned hooves, and birds with singed feathers. The animals were being treated not as tools that had served their purpose, but as heroes who had risked everything for the greater good. Supreme Chancellor Vexthera's branch arms trembled slightly as she processed what they had witnessed. In 1,000 years of galactic civilization, we have never recorded anything like this. The voluntary cooperation between species, the mutual sacrifice, the genuine care for each other's well-being, it challenges everything we thought we knew about the nature of intelligent life. The debate that followed was unlike any in Council history. Traditional arguments about military threats and economic concerns seemed petty in the face of what they had just witnessed. How do you classify as a threat a species whose greatest strength comes from their ability to inspire others to be better than they are? Councillor Marithek, representing the Isolationist Coalition, made one final attempt to frame humanity as a danger. While this display is impressive, we must consider the long-term implications. If human partnership abilities spread throughout the galaxy, it could destabilize every existing social structure. Our entire civilization is built on clear hierarchies and rational resource allocation. What happens when citizens begin forming emotional bonds across species lines? Her words hung in the air like a challenge. It was a fair question, and one that many delegates had been avoiding. The human model of civilization was fundamentally incompatible with the power structures that had governed galactic society for millennia. But before anyone could respond, an unexpected voice entered the debate. Dr. Nixura, the void-born researcher who had participated in the initial studies, had requested permission to address the assembly. Her energy-based form materialized in the center of the chamber, patterns of light dancing across her translucent body. Honored delegates, I speak not as a representative of any government, but as a being who has experienced human partnership firsthand. Her voice carried an unusual warmth that was rarely heard from her species. 6 months ago, I encountered a small Earth creature called Shadow. For the first time in my existence, I experienced voluntary physical affection from another being. She paused, her energy patterns shifting to what could only be described as nostalgic. Shadow taught me that the universe contains possibilities I had never imagined. He showed me that consciousness can reach across the vast differences between species to find common ground. And he did this not through words or grand gestures, but through the simple act of choosing to trust me. Dr. Nixera's patterns intensified. Counselor Marithek asks what happens when citizens begin forming emotional bonds across species lines. I can tell you exactly what happens. We become more than we were before. We discover that the universe is not a hostile place where we must constantly defend ourselves from threats, but a community where we can find friends we never knew existed. The chamber fell completely silent. Dr. Nixera was known as one of the galaxy's most analytical and logical beings, not given to emotional displays or philosophical speculation. Her words carried weight precisely because they came from unexpected quarters. The humans have offered us something unprecedented, she continued. Not conquest, not exploitation, not even trade agreements. They've offered us friendship. The question we must ask ourselves is not whether we can afford to accept this offer, but whether we can afford to reject it. Admiral Korgesh made one last attempt to maintain the traditional perspective. Dr. Nixera, you speak of friendship, but what about security? What about maintaining the stability that has prevented galactic war for centuries? Dr. Nixera's response was immediate and unexpected. Admiral, I've spent my entire career studying conflict resolution and threat assessment. In all my research, I've never encountered a single instance of warfare between species that had formed genuine emotional bonds. The human model doesn't threaten galactic stability. It offers a path to something better, galactic peace. The implications of her statement reverberated through the assembly. If true, it meant that humanity offered not just a new model of civilization, but a solution to the eternal problem of interstellar conflict. Supreme Chancellor Vextera raised her massive arms for order. Honored delegates, we have heard compelling arguments on all sides. The evidence suggests that humanity represents something unprecedented in galactic history, a species whose greatest strength comes not from their ability to dominate others, but from their ability to form genuine partnerships. She gestured toward the data displays showing the hospital rescue. We have witnessed acts of voluntary heroism that defy our understanding of evolutionary psychology. We have heard testimony from our own researchers about the transformative power of interspecies cooperation. And we have been forced to confront the possibility that our traditional models of civilization may not be the only viable options. The Chancellor's voice took on a formal tone as she moved toward the resolution phase of the debate. The question before us is not whether humans pose a threat to our existing order. They clearly do. The question is whether that threat represents danger or opportunity. Trade Coordinator Plimbork spoke up one final time. Chancellor, even if we accept that human partnerships are genuine and beneficial, how do we integrate such a radically different approach into our existing systems? Our economies, our governments, our military structures, everything would have to be reconsidered. Yes, The Chancellor replied simply, "It would. The question is whether we have the courage to attempt such a transformation, or whether we prefer the safety of the status quo." The vote that followed would be remembered as one of the most significant moments in galactic history. Not a vote on whether to accept humanity into the galactic community that had already been assumed, but a vote on whether to embrace the possibility of fundamental change in how civilizations could interact. When the final tallies were recorded, the result was closer than many had expected, but decisive nonetheless. By a margin of 127 to 89, the Galactic Council voted to establish the Interspecies Partnership Initiative, a program designed to explore the possibility of applying human partnership principles to relationships between different intelligent species. As the assembly concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, many found themselves contemplating questions they had never thought to ask. What would it be like to have a friend from another species? What could their civilizations accomplish if they worked together rather than merely coexisting? What new possibilities might emerge when the galaxy's greatest minds chose cooperation over competition? Deep in the quantum communication networks that connected every corner of the galaxy, the news spread at the speed of light. Humanity had been accepted not just as members of the galactic community, but as teachers of a radically new way of thinking about what civilization could be. The universe was about to discover what happened when the simple act of petting an animal became the foundation for reimagining the nature of intelligent life itself. 5 years after the Galactic Council's historic vote, the universe had become a very different place. The Interspecies Partnership Initiative had grown from a tentative experiment into a fundamental transformation of how civilizations interacted with each other. What had begun as curiosity about humanity's strange ability to befriend animals had evolved into something no one had anticipated, a complete reimagining of what galactic society could be. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the Starship Harmony, watching as the most ambitious construction project in galactic history took shape before them. New Eden Station stretched across nearly 50 kilometers of space, its organic curves and flowing lines a stark contrast to the angular, fortress-like structures that had previously dominated galactic architecture. The station was itself a testament to the new philosophy that humanity had brought to the galaxy. Rather than being designed for maximum defensive capability or efficient resource extraction, New Eden had been built around the revolutionary concept of comfort and beauty. Gardens spiraled through its corridors. Art installations from dozens of worlds decorated its public spaces. Most remarkably, it had been designed to accommodate not just the various alien species who would work there, but also their new companions. Elena smiled as she watched a Chronothan researcher named Veltar walking through one of the station's parks, accompanied by what appeared to be a small Earth dog. The sight would have been impossible to imagine just 5 years ago. Chronothan society had been built around rigid hierarchy and individual achievement. The concept of forming emotional bonds with other beings had been not just foreign, but actively discouraged. But Veltar had been one of the first alien researchers to participate in the Partnership Initiative's pilot program. He had spent 6 months on Earth, living with a human family and learning to understand the complex relationships that define human civilization. When he returned to his homeworld, he had brought with him not just knowledge, but a small companion named Buddy. The transformation in Veltar had been remarkable. The rigid, formal Chronothan who had arrived on Earth had been replaced by a being who seemed genuinely happy. His research productivity had increased dramatically, his stress indicators had improved, and, most importantly, he had begun forming meaningful friendships with his colleagues for the first time in his life. Commander Rodriguez? The voice belonged to Dr. Sarah Chun, who had become the director of interspecies relations for the Partnership Initiative. She approached Elena, carrying a data pad filled with the week's progress reports. "The monthly statistics are in. I think you'll find them interesting." Elena accepted the pad and began scrolling through the data. The numbers were indeed remarkable. Crime rates on worlds participating in the Partnership Initiative had dropped by over 60%. scientific collaboration between species had increased exponentially. Most significantly, there had not been a single military conflict between species that had formed partnership bonds. The xenopsychologists are calling it the friendship effect, Dr. Chen explained. When beings form genuine emotional connections across species lines, they become fundamentally incapable of viewing other species as enemies. The neurochemical changes appear to be permanent. Elena nodded, but her attention was caught by movement on the station below. A group of young beings from various species were playing together in one of the recreational areas. Human children ran alongside young aquarians floating in mobile water spheres, while arthropod younglings clicked and chittered in what appeared to be laughter. Most remarkably, they were all accompanied by various animal companions who seemed to understand that their job was to help facilitate play between species rather than just bond with their individual partners. How many worlds are participating now? Elena asked. 47 and growing, Dr. Chen replied. But the real breakthrough isn't just the number of participants. It's the fundamental changes we're seeing in how these civilizations operate. She activated a holographic display showing economic data from across the galaxy. Traditional models predicted that resource allocation for companion animals would create economic inefficiency. But the opposite has happened. Worlds participating in the partnership initiative show increased productivity, enhanced innovation rates, and improved quality of life across all metrics. Elena studied the data with growing amazement. How is that possible? The resources required to care for millions of animal companions should have created a massive economic burden. That's what everyone thought, Dr. Chen agreed. But we underestimated the efficiency gains that come from genuine cooperation. When beings aren't spending their energy on competition and conflict, when they're motivated by genuine care for their colleagues rather than fear their rivals, the entire system becomes more productive. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the station's communication array. An incoming message was being broadcast on all emergency frequencies throughout the galaxy. Elena and Dr. Chun hurried to the command center, where they found the senior staff gathered around the main display screen. The image that appeared was familiar to anyone who had followed galactic politics over the past 5 years. Admiral Korgesh, one of the most vocal opponents of the partnership initiative, stood in what appeared to be a military command center. His insectoid features were as stern as ever, but there was something different about his posture. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, his words transmitted through universal translators to every inhabited world. 5 years ago, I stood before the Galactic Council and warned that humanity's partnership abilities represented a threat to our established order. Today, I stand before you to make a very different announcement. Elena felt her breath catch. Admiral Korgesh had been leading a coalition of military worlds that had refused to participate in the partnership initiative, maintaining that such emotional indulgences were incompatible with the discipline required for galactic defense. This morning, the hegemony of worlds faced what should have been a catastrophic crisis, the Admiral continued. A massive solar flare disabled the defense systems protecting our primary colony world of Zirian Prime. With our shields down and our evacuation capabilities overwhelmed, we faced the loss of over 10 million citizens. The display shifted to show images of a world in chaos. Massive electromagnetic pulses had rendered most technology useless, leaving millions of beings stranded without life support or protection from the planet's harsh environment. Under normal circumstances, Admiral Korgesh continued, our military protocols would have required us to evacuate essential personnel and accept the losses of the remainder. The numbers were simple. We lacked the resources to save everyone. Elena found herself holding her breath. She knew what was coming, but the implications were staggering. But today, something unprecedented happened. Without being asked, without any formal request for assistance, ships from 47 different worlds began arriving at Zirian Prime. Not military vessels, but civilian craft operated by volunteers from species participating in the partnership initiative. The display now showed a stream of ships unlike anything Elena had ever seen. Instead of a uniform, utilitarian vessels typical of military operations, these craft represented dozens of different design philosophies and technologies. What united them was not their appearance, but their purpose. They had all come to help. Humans arrived with their remarkable animal companions, who somehow managed to locate survivors in areas our scanners couldn't penetrate. The Admiral continued. Aquarians brought mobile life support systems that allowed them to sustain beings in environments hostile to their physiology. Chronothan researchers used their analytical abilities to coordinate rescue operations across multiple continents simultaneously. Elena watched in amazement as the rescue operation unfolded on the screen. It wasn't just the scale of the response that was remarkable, but the coordination. Beings from species who had never worked together before were somehow managing to collaborate seamlessly in one of the most complex operations in galactic history. But the most remarkable aspect was not the technical capabilities or the logistical coordination, Admiral Korgesh said, his voice taking on a note of wonder. It was the motivation. These beings hadn't come to Zirian Prime because they expected payment or political advantage. They came because they understood that when any member of the galactic community was in danger, it was everyone's responsibility to help. The final statistics were staggering. Over 10 million beings successfully evacuated, 0 casualties, and the entire operation had been coordinated not by military command structures, but by informal networks of friendship and cooperation that had developed through the Partnership Initiative. Today, every citizen of Zirian Prime is alive because the galaxy has learned what humanity has known for millennia, that our greatest strength comes not from our ability to dominate others, but from our willingness to work together, Admiral Korgesh concluded. Effective immediately, the hegemony of worlds is formally joining the Interspecies Partnership Initiative. As the transmission ended, Elena realized she was witnessing a moment that would be remembered as the tipping point in galactic civilization. The last major holdout against the Partnership Initiative had not just joined the program, but had done so in the most public way possible. Dr. Chen was already pulling up the data streams from across the galaxy. Elena, you need to see this. The response to Admiral Korgesh's announcement is creating a cascade effect. The holographic display showed real-time communication traffic from hundreds of worlds. Governments that had been hesitant to embrace the Partnership Initiative were suddenly announcing their intention to join. Military leaders who had viewed cooperation as weakness were requesting access to partnership training programs. Most remarkably, individual citizens from non-participating worlds were beginning to contact Earth directly, asking how they could form their own interspecies friendships. Over the following weeks, Elena watched as the galaxy transformed itself in ways that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. The rigid hierarchies and competitive dynamics that had defined interstellar relations for millennia began to give way to something unprecedented, genuine cooperation based on mutual care and respect. The economic implications alone were staggering. Trade agreements became partnerships where species shared resources and knowledge freely rather than jealously guarding their advantages. Scientific research accelerated as beings who had previously competed for discoveries began working together to solve common problems. Even military forces began reorganizing themselves around cooperative defense rather than competitive superiority. But the most profound changes were cultural. Art began to flourish as different species shared their aesthetic traditions. Music evolved as beings learned to appreciate the harmonic preferences of other species. Language itself began to change as the universal translators adapted to convey not just meaning, but emotional nuance across species barriers. Elena found herself thinking about the moment that had started it all. A small earth bird named Rainbow asking Ambassador Zexthal if he would remember her. That simple expression of desire for connection had somehow cascaded into a fundamental transformation of galactic civilization. The irony was not lost on her. Humanity had achieved something that the galaxy's greatest military minds had thought impossible. They had convinced an entire galaxy to lay down their arms. not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple demonstration that life was better when beings chose to care about each other. 1 year later, Elena stood once again on the observation deck of the Harmony, but this time she was not alone. Beside her floated Dr. Nixura, whose energy-based form had become a familiar sight throughout the galaxy. At their feet, a small Earth cat named Cosmos purred contentedly, his presence somehow managing to provide comfort to beings from completely different evolutionary backgrounds. The view outside had changed dramatically. New Eden Station had become the center of a growing network of facilities designed around partnership principles. Ships from hundreds of worlds came and went in a constant stream of cooperation and exchange. But what struck Elena most was the absence of military vessels. For the first time in recorded galactic history, there was no need for armed patrols or defensive installations. The galaxy had achieved something that political scientists had thought theoretically impossible: universal peace through universal friendship. Do you think they understand what they've accomplished? Dr. Nixera asked, her energy patterns shifting to indicate contemplation. The humans, I mean. Do they realize that their ability to pet animals has fundamentally changed the nature of civilization itself? Elena smiled as she watched a group of human children teaching alien younglings how to play fetch with Earth dogs. The scene was chaotic and joyful, filled with the kind of laughter that transcends species barriers. I think they understand something more important, she replied. They understand that the universe is better when we choose to be friends rather than enemies. Everything else is just the natural consequence of that choice. As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Sarah Chun joined them on the observation deck. She looked tired but happy, carrying the kind of exhaustion that comes from meaningful work rather than endless struggle. The latest reports are in, she announced. We've reached a milestone that the xenosociologists say was theoretically impossible. 100% of known spacefaring civilizations are now participating in the partnership initiative. The statement hung in the air like a moment of historical significance. Elena realized that they were witnessing the end of one era and the beginning of another. The age of galactic conflict was over. The age of galactic cooperation had begun. But even as she celebrated this achievement, Elena found herself wondering about the future. What would happen to a galaxy that had suddenly discovered the power of friendship? What new challenges would emerge when competition was replaced by cooperation? What possibilities might open up when the combined efforts of hundreds of species were directed toward common goals rather than mutual destruction? The answers to those questions would have to wait for future historians to document. For now, it was enough to know that somewhere in the galaxy, small Earth animals were teaching alien beings how to experience love, and in doing so, they were creating a universe where such love could flourish. As the three beings stood together on the observation deck, watching the dance of ships and the play of children, Elena realized that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy had not been their technology or their knowledge, or even their remarkable partnership abilities. Their greatest gift had been the simple demonstration that the universe could be a place of friendship rather than fear. And in a galaxy where apex predators from different worlds were learning to curl up together for warmth, where ancient enemies were becoming trusted allies, and where the simple act of petting an animal had become the foundation for universal peace, that gift seemed like the most precious thing imaginable. The stars continued their eternal dance across the cosmos, but now they danced to a different rhythm. A rhythm of cooperation rather than competition, of love rather than fear, of friendship rather than dominance. Humanity had taught the galaxy how to pet animals. In doing so, they had taught the universe how to love.